and that's an interesting point. So that's what I wanted to ask you about the distinctions between moral
Yes.
laws and the other laws, because obviously we understand that the Ten Commandments aren't the only moral laws discussed in the
Yes.
Old Testament. So how do you go about making that distinction?
The New Testament helps me distinguish the moral aspects from the ceremonial aspects. It's in the New Testament. Why do you think you have 27 books?
Okay, so we have to use the New Testament as a guide to distinguish those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The New Testament canon, 27 books. Those New Testament books are the inspired explication, interpretation, and application of the Old Testament. Meaning, we look at the Old Testament through the lens of the New Testament, and from the New Testament, we can gather that's still binding. This is not binding in the way it was given because it's been ratified, or this is now no longer binding on me as a spiritual Israelite. You have 27 books in the New Testament. That's the entire purpose of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Okay.
let me ask you a question. The 10 Commandments written on the tablet, right? The stone tablets,
Yeah.
right? And even I've heard
Yeah.
some of the Adventists distinguish between what God wrote with his finger on the tablets from what Moses wrote later, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I want everyone here, because I don't want to misrepresent the Adventist position. They say God wrote with his finger the 10 Commandments on the tablets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what Moses wrote is distinct, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now watch here. Tablets, right?
Yeah.
2 Corinthians 3. Tablets, right? And when Moses came down, Exodus 34, right? Well, God gave him the commandments, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are we beginning to commend ourselves again? Or do we need some letters of condemnation to you or from you? You are our letter, having been written in our hearts, known and read by all men, being manifested that you are a letter of Christ. You are the proof that we are ministers of Christ. People read your life and see our impact. Minister Tobias, having been written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of hearts of flesh. So he's talking about the tablets, right? Given to Moses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're seeing this, right?
Sorry, could we just read it
Tablets
over
of
again?
stone. What
Yeah.
are the tablets of stone? What God wrote with his finger.
Yeah.
So he's saying, you are written not with ink, with the Spirit of the living God, and you're not written on tablets of stone, but on tablets of hearts of flesh, right? So he's contrasting the tablets of our hearts, made alive by the Spirit, where God's law is etched by the Spirit in our hearts, from the tablets of stone, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
watch. But watch what he says about these tablets. And such confidence we have through Christ toward God. Not that we are sufficient in ourselves to consider anything as coming from ourselves. We are not sufficient. God makes us sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
We are nothing without God, but our sufficiency from God, who also made us sufficient as ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. Notice what he's talking about. The letter meaning the tablets of stone. Okay, well, watch here. But if the ministry of death in letters, having been engraved on stones, came with glory, so that the sons of Israel could not look intently at the face of Moses, that's Exodus 34. That's what he's talking about. When Moses went up, received the tablets, and came down, he was shining with the light of God, so he had to put a veil because of the glory of his face, which was being brought to an end. Watch. That glory of Moses faded, right?
Mm.
It didn't last.
No.
He was luminescent for a period, but it faded, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. It came to an end, right? How will the ministry of the Spirit not be even more in glory? So if the tablets of stone had glory accompanying it, but that glory faded, how much more glorious is the ministry of the new covenant, which is by the Spirit? You see what he's saying?
Mm-hmm.
For if the ministry of condemnation, meaning Moses' ministry, which results in death because we break it, has glory, much more does the ministry of righteousness abound in glory. How much more glorious is Jesus' ministry, his new covenant? For indeed, what had been glorious had been, in this case, has no glory, because of the glory that surpasses it. Now he's comparing. This is comparative.
Mhm.
Now, Moses' ministry had glory attending it. But in comparison to the glory that accompanies Jesus' ministry, it makes Moses' glory look like nothing. Right?
Yeah.
But now here's the problem, folks, my buddy. For that which was being brought to an end was with glory, much more that which remains is in glory. Do you see what he just told you? The ministry of Moses that included tablet of stone has come to an end. Right here. I didn't write it. Paul did.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see it? For if that which was being brought to an end had glory, much more that which remains is in glory. Meaning, the ministry of Moses, the tablets of stone, that glory has ended. But the ministry of Christ, the new covenant, never ends. So its glory remains. So are you binding me to the tablets of Moses?
Yeah. So are we saying that the Old Testament law, or the law of Moses, was done with?
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the law was then reestablished by Jesus in the New Testament.
You got it. See, now, why do I say keep the 10 commandments? Because the New Testament binds me to those same commandments. But the only thing not explicitly said in the New Testament is to keep the seventh day.
Yes, exactly. So my thing was, so when Jesus says, "I didn't come to abolish the law," how do you?
Let's read it. They all misquote that. Man, do they misquote that. Ooh, they kill me in the comment section. And I've done millions of sessions on it. Let's see what he meant in context, shall we?
Okay.
Okay, watch here. Matthew 5. You know how many times, and I've addressed this billions of times. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. Now, this word fulfill, you're going to see what it means. Okay? For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments, we're going to see which commandments, and teaches others to do the same, shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Whatever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Now, they stop here. No, stop. Because Jesus tells you how he fulfills the law and the prophets.
Yeah.
What?
Sorry, I'm remembering the point you made on this before now. Yeah.
Okay. For I say to you unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. But then let's keep reading. You have heard that the ancients were told, you shall not murder, but I say to you. So what is he talking about? I have come to fulfill the law and the prophets. How? By doing all they said I would do, and by telling you the correct application and interpretation. So it's not what you follow in the law, you follow my application, explication of it. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you. Now it was said, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you. Why do they stop there and not read what he means? Again, you have heard the ancients say, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I say to you, and he says, don't even make any more vows. How's that keeping the law when he's telling you don't make any more vows?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye, tooth for an tooth. But I say to you. You get it?
Yeah.
But then he stopped there. Does he stop? No. But then he goes in Matthew 6. Look at the commandments. Matthew 6. Watch here. Beware of doing your righteousness before men, be noticed by them. Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you give to the poor, notice he continues showing you how he fulfills the law and the prophets. He continues all the way to 7. And then 7 tells you what commandments. Watch here. I'm not making it up. It's like people think Matthew begins and ends with Matthew 5:17 to 20. No. Here it is. Let's continue. Here it is. What commandments? His commandments. His explication, interpretation, application of the law and the prophets. Because they're all pointing to him, and that he is the one who gives the law and prophets a true meaning. So we follow him, his fulfillment, his explanation. Because here, Matthew 7:21 to 29. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, in your name do we not prophesy? In your name cast out demons, and in your name do many miracles? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Here it is again, not keeping the law. What law? Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them. What law?
Yeah, the law that Jesus establishes with his words. Yeah.
Thank you. And that's why they were shocked, because look, now it happened that when Jesus had finished these words, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he's teaching them as one having authority, not as their scribes. And how does he end before he goes to heaven? Look what he says. Matthew 28, 18 to 20. Oh, yeah, and I'm going to show you the word fulfill, by the way. And Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Spirit, teaching them to obey all that I commanded you. Not Moses, what I've been telling you throughout this entire earthly ministry, and what the Spirit's then going to make known to you. And behold, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. So why did they stop in Matthew 5, 17 to 20?
Mm-hmm.
But now let me show you the word fulfill, what it means. You ready? Because he said here, do not think I've come to destroy the law of the prophets. I did not come to destroy, abolish, but to fulfill, right?
Yeah.
Fulfill. Now watch this very word fulfill. Watch. Matthew tells you, you don't need to guess. Matthew 1. All right. Watch here. Matthew 1, 22 to 23. Now all this took place in order that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet would be fulfilled, saying, behold, the virgin shall be with child and shall bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which translated means God with us. He's talking not just the commands, but the predictions about him. They will not be abolished until they're fulfilled in me. Like when the prophet Isaiah said a virgin will conceive, I came to fulfill that.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else getting it? How about this? Another one, Matthew 2, 13 and 15. Now, when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother while it was still night, and departed for Egypt, and he remained there until the death of Herod, in order that what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet would be fulfilled, saying, out of Egypt I called my son. So going to Egypt, coming out of Egypt, fulfilled the prophet Hosea. So what do you mean by fulfill? Everything said about me that I would do will be fulfilled in me, and none of the law and the prophets will be abolished until they're fulfilled in me. Here's another one. Matthew 2:23. And came and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken through the prophets would be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene.
Well, yeah.
So where do we get fulfill means I came to obey every jot and tittle and do everything it says the way it says it. That's not the meaning.
Yeah, he came to complete it. Okay. So with the sorry, it's still early. My brain's still.
That's all right. You can go back and rewatch this until it becomes second nature.
Yeah. 100%.
That's why it's recorded.
So the law of Moses was fulfilled, done with, and then Jesus reestablished it.
He only enforced, to be more precise, he only enforced those commands of the law of Moses that he wanted his followers to observe. So when we say it's done away with, we're not saying completely vanished, because Jesus still makes part of his law many aspects of the law of Moses. That's why you have 27 books.
But you're saying specifically to the Sabbath, he readapted it.
There's nothing in the New Testament says you must observe the seventh day of Israel. It doesn't say that. Now, it's not simply an argument from silence. It's important because when we see how the early church established by Christ understood Jesus' teaching, they were taught by the apostles, like Ignatius, Sunday is the day we observe.
Mhm.
Let me give you an example of what I mean by aspects of Moses still being made part of Jesus' law. Here, Ephesians 6:1-3. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. See, that's part of the 10 commandments.
Yeah.
So that it may be well with you and that you may live long in the land. So here, I'm told, as part of Jesus' law, I keep that law of Moses. That's why you have 27 books of the New Testament.
I have a quick. So with, I was just thinking,
Oh, I didn't put it up on the screen. I apologize. It's right there. You see it? Ephesians 6:1-3. My apologies.
Mhm.
Paul says, under the law of Christ, new covenant, I still keep that command God gave through Moses. Ephesians 6:1-3. See it?
Yeah.
Now, by the way, you want proof that Paul did not keep the law of Moses? Here it is. You ready?
Yeah. He also talks about how he keeps the law of Christ.
Yeah, but he contrasted it with the law of Moses. How do I know? Here, 1 Corinthians 9:19-23. He's contrasting the law of Christ with the law of Moses. How do I know? For though I am free from all, I made myself, 1 Corinthians 9:19-23, slave to all, so that I may win more. And to the Jew I became as a Jew, so that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though not being myself under the law. Do Seventh-day Adventists read this or no? So did Paul just say, with the Jews who are under the law, I live in a way where I don't offend them and their sensibilities by doing something that's an infraction against the law, so I don't cause them to stumble. But wait, he does have a law, but it's not the law of the Jews, so that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law. So when I came to people lawless, I didn't say, hey, you're committing adultery, murder, because they don't care about the law. So I didn't come preaching the law. I came and preached Jesus crucified.
Mm-hmm.
So to those who are without law, as without law, act like I didn't have law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ. How much clearer can it be? The law of Christ is not the law of Moses. He says, I'm under the law of Christ, but I'm not under the law of the Jews.
Right.
How much clearer can it be?
No, it makes sense.
So why are the Seventh-day Adventists forcing Gentiles who are not ethnically Jews to observe the law of Moses?
Ellen White.
You got it. But Paul said, guys, if you missed it, black and white. To those under the law, meaning the Jews, I acted in a way that would not offend them by going against the law, though I am not under that law. But I am under the law of Christ. You can't get a greater contrast that we follow the Torah of Christ, not the Torah of Moses.
I have a question.
Yes.
So there is no law in the Old Testament that we keep or we understand to be sin that is re-spoken about in the New.
Whatever of the Old Testament is binding on us will be affirmed either directly or indirectly. Like when Jesus talks about sexual ethics
Yes.
and morality. He doesn't go in great depth as the law of Moses does. But, for example, Paul will talk about lesbianism, homosexuality condemned. That's in Leviticus 18, Leviticus 20. But other relations like bestiality and so on, that is not restated, but it's assumed. So unless the text tells us this command has been fulfilled in such a way, it's not binding on us, or this command was a shadow and its replacement is something greater, because it's a shadow of something greater, like circumcision points to baptism, then for all intents and purposes, we will assume, for example, the sexual ethics of the law of Moses. We'll assume it and presuppose it. But that's my whole point, in that if we're saying we keep the Sabbath of Israel, well, we would find some indication of it in the New Testament. And it's not simply arguing from silence, because when the New Testament binds the Christians to those aspects of the law, they come out like Acts 15, when the Jews were telling them, you need to get circumcised, keep the law of Moses, they go, no, you don't need to get circumcised. And here's what you're going to keep. You're going to keep these aspects of it. No fornication. May God have mercy on us, forgive us, and that we practice what we preach, sexual immorality. No sacrifices of idols. No animals with blood in them or strangled. Right? So those are those aspects that even the Gentiles keep. Well, what about Sabbath? They'll say, well, there were Gentiles who kept the Sabbath. Of course, because those were the God-fearing Gentiles who only had the choice of following Judaism. There was no other true religion. What other religion do you want them to follow? Right? At that time, you had only two choices: the religion of the Jews or paganism. So when the Jews convert the Gentiles, what law do you think they're going to keep? The law of Moses. But then Paul comes, Peter comes, John comes, say, hey, the law of Moses is pointing to Christ. You are now bound to keep the law of Christ if you really want to be saved, because the law is pointing to him. If you insist on following Moses, rejecting Christ, God will reject you. The law can do nothing for you. Right?
Yeah.
But I want to show you more proof that Jesus is the true Torah. You ready?
Yeah.
You're going to catch it here. Watch here. Jesus is the Torah, because look what Paul's going to do. Okay. Deuteronomy 30, 10-14. Watch here. When you listen to the voice of Yahweh your God to keep his commandments. Now, in this context, it's Moses, right?
Yeah.
And his statutes, which are written in this book of the law. When you return to Yahweh your God with all your heart and soul, right? Okay. So he's talking about following the commandments, statutes of Moses, right? In the law, book of the law. Now watch. For this commandment, which I'm commanding you today, is not too difficult for you, nor is it far from you. It's not hard to do, and it's not far away that you don't have access to it. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven for us and get it for us and make us hear it, that we may do it. You don't need to go to heaven to get it, right? Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will cross the sea for us and get it for us and make us hear it, that we may do it. You don't have to travel to find it. Why? But the word is very near you, in your mouth, in your heart, that you may do it. So he's saying here, right, in verses 12-14, you don't need to go to heaven to find the law. It's come down to you, right? Nor do you need to cross the sea to find it. It's brought to you. It's in your mouth, right?
Yeah.
That's what he says, right? Now watch, guys, what Paul does with this. Paul's not going to quote this. Pay attention. You guys got to listen to this. Paul is going to quote this, but apply it to who? Romans 10, 6-13. But the righteousness of faith, the righteousness that comes by your faithfulness, speaks in this way. Do not say in your heart, who will go up to heaven. Didn't we just read this? Do not say in your heart, who will go up to heaven. Didn't we just read that? It is not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven for us. Right? So what is Paul quoting?
What, Deuteronomy?
Which is about the law of Moses, right?
Yeah.
But look what he does with it. Do not say in your heart, who will go up to heaven. That is to bring Christ down. He just told you Christ is your Torah, not the law of Moses. He just took the verses about the law of Moses and applied it to Jesus, saying, Jesus is our true Torah, and he came down so that we don't have to find him and access him. He's already here. Or who will go down into the abyss? That is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. Wait, that's what's this passage here. But the word is very near you, in your mouth, in your heart, that you may do it. And he's talking about the law of Moses. Paul says, no, it's actually about Jesus. What word is near you in your mouth? That is the word of faith which you are preaching. That if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, here's your Torah, buddy, and believe in your heart that God raised him from dead, you'll be saved. Here it is, your Torah, Jesus.
Well, yeah. So, sorry. So does this have parallel with when Hebrews 8 talks about how the law is inscribed in our hearts?
You mean Hebrews 8, the new covenant? Yes. And that's also 2 Corinthians, yeah. And that is stated in contrast of the old covenant being made obsolete. Like 2 Corinthians 3 says. We are a letter written by the Spirit on tablets of hearts of flesh. Same thing. 2 Corinthians 3, Hebrews 8, and here Romans 10. You see why the Orthodox Jews hate Paul so much? Because he's telling them Jesus is our Torah, Jesus is the true law, the abiding law, the true Torah, and Moses' Torah is a shadow pointing to Christ. Now that the true Torah has come, why are you now pointing me to the shadow?
Right. So when it's spoken about how the law will be in our minds, right? Does that mean that we now have a natural inclination towards keeping the law, or
not a natural inclination? We have an inclination made alive, rejuvenated, energized by the Spirit.
So
that's
do we
what
need
being born again means?
So we need to be instructed through Scripture in order to know what this law is.
More specifically, we need to be taught the accurate application New Testament in order to know what that law is and which parts of the law of Moses is binding on us.
You
see my point?
Yeah.
Marcos, you're getting it. Good man. Watch all my other sessions on it. He's also a Seventh-day Adventist.
Oh, right.
Now, can I show you that God already prepared people for a new law given by Messiah? Can I show it to you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right here. Here it is, guys, in Isaiah. Here it is. Isaiah 42, verse 1 to 4. Behold, my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one, in whom my soul is well pleased. I have put my spirit upon him. My servant, I put my spirit on him. Now notice who this is going to be. He will bring forth justice to the nations. He will not cry out or raise his voice, nor make his voice heard in the street. A crushed reed he will not break, and a faintly burning wick he will not extinguish. He will bring forth justice and truth. Now watch. He will not be faint or crushed until he has established justice in the earth, and the coastlands will wait expectantly for his law. The coastlands means the nations, the Gentiles, right? The nations. That's not just Israelites, the nations, right?
Right.
The nations, right?
Yeah.
That's the Gentiles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Gentiles will be waiting for whose law? The servant's law, right?
Mm-hmm. His law. Yeah.
Let me show you what the word law is in Hebrew, okay? Watch here. And I'm going to show you who fulfills it. Sorry.
Take your time.
Yep, watch it. So you can see what the Hebrew word is. What's the law that the Gentiles, the nations, are looking for and hoping for? Here it is. Let me enlarge it. Right here, buddy. Black and white, mister. Black and white. Okay, watch here. All right. You see it here? You see it's Ula Toratu. Ula Toratu. What is that word? Ula Toratu? Torah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Illa Toratu. Illa Toratu. Ula Toratu. Guys, I don't speak English, let alone Hebrew, but his Torah.
Mm-hmm.
So Isaiah already announced, when the servant comes, it's his Torah, his law we will follow. But now, according to New Testament, who fulfilled this? Behold my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one, whom my soul is well pleased. Isaiah 42, 1 to 4. Here it is. Matthew 12, 15 to 21. But Jesus, aware of this, withdrew from there. Many followed him, and he healed them all, and warned them not to make him known, in order that what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet would be fulfilled. Here's that word fulfilled again. How did Jesus fulfill the law and the prophets? By doing what the prophet said he would do. And look what he quotes. Behold, my servant whom I've chosen, my beloved, the one whom I love, in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him. Oh, he's quoting Isaiah 42. Behold, my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one, whom my soul is well pleased. I put my spirit upon him. And that's the servant whose law the Gentiles, you and I, will hope in, cling to, and obey. I will put my spirit upon him. He shall proclaim justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel, nor cry out, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A battered reed he will not break off, and a smoldering wick he will not put out, until he leads justice to victory. And in his name, who will they trust in? The law of Moses? No. In his name, the Gentiles will hope. They will trust in him. and his law, his Torah, they will cling to.
Yeah.
How much clearer could the New Testament be?
Mm-hmm.
How much clearer could 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 118 be? Hebrews 8, verses 1 to 13 be? Romans 10, verses 6, all the way 18 be? I don't know how much clearer it'd be. It's over, man. It's over.
Mm-hmm. I hear it. That makes sense. And I've heard you discuss it before, but Colossians 14 to 17. Colossians 2, 14 to 17.
16 to 18, yes.
Where it talks about the handwritings of ordinances. So the ordinances referring to the whole Torah?
Well, Paul is the one who's saying it's referring to our breaking, our violating the law, which brings condemnation. Because he goes on to say, it's not. You don't need to guess. You just read. By the way, it shows you that baptism is the New Testament circumcision. You just read this. Watch here. Here, let's start. Colossians 2:11-13. What was physical circumcision under Abraham and by extension the law of Moses is baptism. Colossians 2:11-13. In whom you're also circumcised. Do I have it on the screen? I didn't put it on the screen. Sorry. In whom you're also circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, and the removal of the body of flesh in the circumcision of Christ, having been buried with him in baptism. So how do we get spiritually circumcised? In baptism, in which you're also raised up with him through faith in the working of God, who raised him from the dead, and you being dead in your transgressions and the uncircumcision of your flesh. So you see, physical circumcision points to spiritual circumcision.
Yeah.
And you need God to spiritually circumcise you, which physical circumcision pointed to. He made you alive with him, having graciously forgiven us all our transgressions. Now, let me ask you a question before I continue. Physical circumcision on the 8th day pointed to spiritual circumcision, where God would spiritually cut off that evil inclination that had enslaved you, right?
Mm-hmm.
When did God bring about the spiritual circumcision, what we call the new creation? When did he bring it about? When did it happen? He made you alive with him.
On the cross.
No, he made you alive with him.
Mm-hmm.
You were raised up with him. When did it take place?
After, when he resurrected.
Okay, resurrection. So Jesus' resurrection was the foundation, was the grounds which ushered in the new creation, spiritual circumcision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's the first of the new creation. He was raised immortal as the first fruits that all of us in union with him will be raised immortal. Okay, now watch. I want to ask you a question. What day was Jesus raised?
On the first.
First day, which is Sunday, right?
Yeah.
Which is the 8th day, the day after the 7th.
Yeah.
So why were they circumcised physically on the 8th day? Because it's pointing to Christ's 8th day resurrection. Because he was raised on the first day, which is the day after Sabbath, which is the 8th day.
Mm-hmm. Could you explain that a little bit more?
You explain it. Circumcision took place on the 8th day, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm confused a little bit by the 8th and the first day.
No, you won't be so confused. Just walk with me. So circumcision takes place on the 8th day, right?
Okay, yeah.
And circumcision points to spiritual circumcision, right?
Yeah.
And who ushered in spiritual circumcision?
Jesus.
How?
By resurrecting.
It was right there. It says we were made alive with him when he raised us with him. Mm-hmm. So what day was he raised?
On the 8th day, on the first day. Yeah.
Because it's the day after the 7th.
Yeah.
But the day after 7th, 8th day, coincidentally, is the first day. And why is it the first day? Because it's the first day of a new creation. He's the first day of a new creation.
Mm-hmm.
And it so happens that it's day after the 7th, which is the 8th day. You see how it all ties in? 8th day, Jesus ushers in the new creation. the day after Sabbath, 8th day, which happens to be the first day, because that signifies the first day of a new creation. So why wouldn't you gather on Sunday when it all happened on Sunday?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I'm trying to understand the significance of saying 8th day rather than just saying first day.
Because the circumcision that points to spiritual circumcision took place on the 8th day, and spiritual circumcision took place on Sunday, which is the first day, signifying the first day of new creation, but it's also the day after 7 to tie it in with the physical circumcision taking place on the 8th day. Why 8th day?
Yeah, okay. I hear it.
You understand? Because
Yeah.
the 8th day is by necessity the day after the 7th.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And yet the 7th day is the Sabbath day. So notice, you don't get circumcised on the 7th day. The 8th day, which necessarily is the day after the 7th day, but in a 7-day work week, what comes after the 7th day? The first day of the week. Why first day? Because that's pointing to the first day of the new creation. Because when Christ rose, that's the beginning of the new creation. So it's the first day of a new creation ushered in by Christ. And that's all on Sunday.
Okay.
See, so why ignore Sunday when everything took place on Sunday? Everything. But you, Seventh-day Adventists, poo-poo this Sunday, you don't even honor Sunday, you don't respect Sunday, when it all began on Sunday for Christians. How does that make sense? You tell me, how does that make sense? But now let's continue. Because if everything begins for us on that Sunday, the Lord's Day, the new creation, physical resurrection, immortality, moral incorruptibility, destruction of sin, Satan, and death.
Yeah.
And you, Seventh-day Adventists, don't even give it a second glance, and it's all about the seventh day. So what? What Jesus did is an afterthought. What Jesus did is insignificant. When it all happened on Sunday.
And even the obviously day of Pentecost when the Holy Spirit came down was also on the first day. Okay.
Okay, now let me show you what you're asking me about. What is the handwriting? Well, you don't need to guess. And you being dead in your transgressions and uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive with him, having graciously forgiven us all our transgressions, having canceled out the certificate of debt, consisting of decrees against us, which was hostile to us. He also has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross, having disarmed the rulers and authorities. He made a public display of them, having triumphed over them in him. Now, here's the explanation. Therefore, now he's going to explain what he just said here. No one is to judge you in food and drink, or respect to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath day, things which are only a shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Meaning, who is Paul's audience and who are Paul's enemies that he was refuting historically?
The Jews.
So when the Adventists saying, no, Paul is not saying, Sabbaths and these festivals are not something that you need to follow, and don't let anyone condemn you. He's teaching the opposite, that when you keep them and people tell you don't keep, no, because his audience are the Jews who are telling the Gentiles, you better keep these festivals and Sabbaths because you got to keep the law of Moses. He's saying, no, who cares what they got to say?
So with the verse, when it says in respect to, so in Mary, in the Greek, I saw an article written by some SDA guy, which basically he was trying to explain that when it says in respect to, he's referring to a part of the festivals, the new moons, and the Sabbath days. So
I don't know, where can someone twist the word respect? It means do not let them judge you concerning festivals, new moons, or Sabbath day. He's twisting the Greek. Here. This is what happens when people pretend to know Greek. It is clear he's saying, don't let someone condemn you in regards to these things. Where in the hell did he get the word respect? Let's see. Yeah, that's what I have to do. Okay. Context defines meaning, not simply a lexical approach to scripture. Colossians 2:16. Okay. In, it's a preposition. In, drink. In, it's a preposition. Where the hell did he get that this preposition means only a part? It's simply the word in. In, into, right, can also mean because of. Here.
So I think the point he was making was that instead of referring to the actual things, it's talking about the sacrifices that are made within those three.
Where does he mention sacrifice? He mentions food and drinks and the like.
Yeah.
Food, drink, feast, new moon. But then what about Sabbaths? Yeah, when they have to go that route, they're desperate, my friend.
Yeah.
Oh, they're desperate.
I hear it. Yeah. Okay.
So, brother, there's no good arguments for Sabbath keeping. None. I'm being honest with you. And I'm not being stubborn. But the one that seals it for me, you're going to tell me the very disciples of the apostles, appointed by the apostles in the power of the Holy Spirit, filled with the same Holy Spirit, all agreed Sunday, they were all wrong, and yet you come in the 19th century to set them straight, and you're all right? So that means the church became corrupted, and the true faith became corrupted and was lost because the majority of Christians were Gentiles, and these bishops claimed to have been appointed by the apostles, and the bishops after them, and the bishops after them. So Jesus failed? That's blasphemy.